Hello again, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Precious Ihinitu, and I am a Program Associate at Resilience Technologies. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar. As we commemorate the Data Privacy Week, it is important that we take out time to discuss and reflect on the state of privacy in today's world, and also talk about why it matters now more than ever. But before we begin, I'd like to inform you that this session is being recorded and the recording will be made available on our YouTube channel afterward. So if you want to revisit any part of today's discussion, you'll definitely be able to do so. For those of you who may not be familiar, Resilience Technologies is committed to enhancing digital security and resilience for African civil society organizations and at-risk communities. We believe that a strong digital defense is crucial to protecting freedom of speech, privacy, and essential services across the continent. And so we work hard to ensure that individuals and organizations can operate safely in the digital space. And for today's session, we will be exploring the anonymity paradox. You know, we all live in an age where our lives are increasingly digital, and we would like to believe that we have control over our online presence. But are we ever truly anonymous? How much of our data is actually private? To what extent are we being watched? Because we know we are being watched to an extent. What is the way forward? These are some of the questions some of us would have, and we'll be unpacking them in this webinar today. To guide us through our conversation, we are honored and delighted to have with us Bisola Adediji, a highly experienced digital security associate at Resilience Technologies. Bisola is a cybersecurity professional with extensive experience working with security-focused NGOs. Over the past 3 years, she has developed deep expertise in vulnerability assessments, incident response, and digital threat management. Her work focuses on helping individuals and organizations safeguard their digital assets while navigating real-world constraints. And today, she will be presenting key insights and recommendations from her report titled Schrodinger's Anonymity, Anonymous Until Observed. This report will be available for download after the webinar, so please check it out if you want to go deeper into today's discussion. I encourage you to stay engaged throughout the session because this webinar promises to be an insightful one. We would like this to be interactive, so please feel free to drop your thoughts and your questions in the chat box. We would actually have a dedicated Q&A session towards the end after Bisola's presentation, where she will address as many questions as possible. So please share your questions as they come to mind, and we will definitely get to it. Without further ado, let's get this started. I will be handing over to Bisola now to begin the session. Thank you and enjoy the webinar.
Hi, just give me a moment, please. I'm trying to share my screen. All right, can everybody hear me? And can you see my screen? Oh, please, can I? Okay, all right, thank you. So, hi, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening from wherever you're joining us. And welcome to today's webinar on the Anonymity Paradox. My name is Bisola, and I'm talking to you about my report on how anonymity exists in a state of superposition where you can never truly tell how anonymous or identifiable you truly are on the internet until an entity, usually one that has more resources than you have access to, tries to observe you. So I hope this presentation sheds light into what anonymity looks like in the grand scheme of things, and you're able to understand how to better protect your privacy on the internet. So our agenda is very straightforward. I think somebody's unmuted. Okay, So I'll kick off by first talking to us about the metaphor I used for this report, which is the Schrodinger's box. Then I'll talk about anonymity and how we fit into the anonymity set. Then I'll talk about the anonymity paradox. I'll talk about state surveillance and technology and how it affects your ability to be anonymous on the internet. We'll examine the case study of the Nigerian whistleblower, PDOM, and then we'll talk about the way forward as to how you can enhance your privacy on the internet. All right, so starting off, in 1935, a scientist called Schrödinger proposed a thought experiment where you have a cat in a box, and in that box, along with cats, you have a flask of poison and a radioactive source. Now, all of these two things with the cat in the box are harmful to the cat, but the box is sealed and it is not transparent. So until you open that box, you can never truly know if harm has been done to the cat. That is, the cat is dead. This metaphor can actually be applied when thinking about digital anonymity. You do all these things to be anonymous on the internet. You get VPN, you use Tor, you use pseudonyms, and all these other things. And once you have acquired what you deem adequate privacy measures, the natural assumption is that you're anonymous on the internet. But my report proposes that you can never truly know how anonymous you are or how identifiable you are on the internet until somebody now decides to observe you. Now, the cat in this scenario is you, and the, say, flags of poison and radioactive source are big tech and all these companies tracking your activities across the internet. Now, until an entity now decides to look into that box to check what it is you are doing, you can never truly know if all your attempts to be anonymous on the internet has actually been successful. Now, if we're talking about anonymity, we have to talk about the anonymity set. I don't know if we're familiar with set theory for mathematics, where you have a universal set, that's a big set that has everybody in it. Now, inside of that universal set, you have subsets, you have smaller sets that contains elements, or in this case, people with similar attributes. So, to talk about anonymity, we first have to start with the universal set of all internet users. If you use the internet, you belong under this set. When you now decide to become private, you want to be anonymous on the internet, you now belong to a smaller set called the anonymity set. And what makes you a part of the set is the attributes you share with other users that are trying to achieve the same end goal as you. Now, unlinkability is a very, very important element to anonymity, which just simply means that in this set, we already established that you have similar attributes. But if somebody should pick a random element from that set, they should not be able to link their activity to their real life persona. So think about it like this: you go to a party, everybody's dressed normally, shirts, jeans, and all of that. And five people walk in and they're masked, say they are wearing a Dali mask or something. Unlinkability now demands that amongst those five people, you should not be able to now pick one and say, okay, look at the color of her hair, look at the color of her nails, look at the color of her jeans. This will definitely be Sola. Unlinkability demands that among those five people, I know that those five people are anonymous, we don't know who they are, but I should not be able to observe attributes that they have and be able to deduce who their offline persona is. And that now leads us to the anonymity paradox, which the paradox is very simple. The more steps you take to be anonymous online, the more identifiable you are. Now, when you are a privacy conscious user on the internet, you belong to a very small set of internet users. And that's because you adopt behaviors that are typically different from what typical internet traffic looks like. So anybody using a VPN, their traffic is going to differ from normal internet traffic. Anybody using Tor, their traffic is going to differ from normal internet traffic. So now these privacy enhancing behaviors can now create recognizable patterns. If there's one thing we as human beings are very good at doing is leaving behind breadcrumbs, traces that when aligned, it can create patterns that can point to a bigger picture. And these patterns that you leave behind when you are embracing these privacy enhancing behaviors can actually make you more trackable than less. Now, when you now observe these behaviors within a very small set, it can lead to something called correlation attacks, where similar anonymous activities can be linked together. Correlation here now means that you're able to take this thing, you're able to take this, you're able to take different elements, align them, and see what they have in common in order to deduce a conclusion. Now, metadata is one of the greatest, I would say, weapon fashioned against you when you are trying to be anonymous on the internet. So you have all these tools that are encrypted. Nobody can see the message you are sending. But we have something. But the Achilles heel here is metadata. Metadata being data about data. So if I send you a WhatsApp message, WhatsApp does end-to-end encryption where the message from transit to when it gets to you, nobody can see what is there. But at the same time, there are metadata attached to that data. Things like the time the data was sent, what node sent this data, what node received the data, what is the frequency of data transfer between these two nodes, what was the size of the data sent, all these other things, how long did it take to process this data would actually tell you what the data traffic is like. So your text-based data is going to take different processing power and time compared to, say, video, audio, and all these other things. And you can now pick this metadata that I've just described to you, and whoever is trying to observe you can, from there, create patterns to which they can understand your behavior and actually connect it to your offline persona. Now, if you look at the image I have here, it's basically a website that allows you to analyze traffic. You can pick an IP address and put it there, and it's able to tell you that, oh, this traffic is actually coming from a VPN. And that is one way that you can actually stand out from all other traffic going through a channel. Now, as I was explaining before, end-to-end encryption may be able to safeguard your message content, the content of whatever data it is you're sending, but metadata is going to be the weapon fashioned against you. So there are several messaging platforms that fall under this. WhatsApp, for example, like I made the example before, you encrypt messages content, but at the same time, you are still logging metadata from over like 40 different points. And this metadata, while they might not give you exactly what was the content of the message, can give you a very decent idea into what's going on within the communication timeline. Now, another example of metadata vulnerability we can point to is German authorities in September of 2024. They actually used timing analysis of metadata to break Tor's anonymity. Now, what is Tor? The way Tor works is that it provides a decentralized internet infrastructure. And for Tor to be able to do this, it needs several nodes spread across the world. Now, Tor does not own, dare I say, any of this infrastructure. A lot of it is contributed by volunteers, organizations, and in many cases, government. So because in this specific case, German authority owned some of the entry nodes, because for Tor, we have something called the entry nodes where your data come in, then you hop through many nodes before it goes out the exit node. Now, in the case of this German authority breaking Tor's anonymity, at the entry nodes, there were lots of German government owned computers or infrastructures, and as such, they had access to everything that was going on that network at the internet service provider level, and as well as the metadata they are collecting from the nodes they have on the Tor network. Now, they are not able to see what is the messages passing to and fro, but through correlation, all the metadata they're able to gather from all these nodes and points, they're able to break the anonymity and actually uncover the identity of some of the users on this network. Now, at the beginning, I mentioned how your anonymity is actually at mercy of whoever is observing you. And usually, or more often than not, in case of civil society organization and human rights defenders, it is usually an entity with much more capacity than they have, much more resources, much more finances than they have. And more often than not, it is the state. The most common adversary towards anonymity is usually state actors, because they have both passive and active jurisdiction within both active and passive communication line within their jurisdiction. For example, African governments in the past year spent over $1 billion just on surveillance technology, and they don't use this. Most of what they use this technology for is to target journalists, peaceful activists, or whoever it is that's standing in the way of whatever it is they are trying to achieve. And you cannot truly be anonymous against somebody that has access to every single infrastructure you are going to use to access the internet. Now, this now results in a very high probability distribution where if this government is interested in finding a specific individual, they can very easily be connected to their anonymous activities. In addition to that, service providers can legally be compelled through subpoenas and such to reveal user information. It has happened severally with MTN, for example. It can, in some cases, it's for criminal activities where they compel the service provider to provide call records, internet records for a specific user. And in most cases, it's also for journalists or whoever it is that is opposing that government. Our case study, we're going to be looking at PDOM. So if you're from Nigeria and you use Twitter very well, you probably know about PDOM. He's a Nigerian whistleblower that was very renowned for exposing certain government excesses and generally unethical practices, right? And he took the steps that you would consider very pertinent for anonymity. So he used a pseudonym. He does not post he has not posted any of his picture. And I think he was only on Twitter. Consistent internet image across board. Typically, you should not be able to uncover the identity of PDOM, right? But in Sorry, but in August of last year, that's 2024, Nigeria's security advisor was able to reveal that they have actually frozen PDOM's crypto assets worth millions of dollars actually held in different wallets. And from analysis of how this was able to happen, the culprit in this case was alleged to be centralized exchanges. So one of the key driving factors behind the early adoption of cryptocurrency was actually the fact that you can exchange money anonymously. So you are free from quote unquote the shackles of traditional finance institutions where you have to submit your name, different forms of identification in order to be banked, right? But this specific advantage of crypto is already being undermined by centralized exchanges where they are just collecting just as much information as traditional banking institutions. And because they are operating under government jurisdiction, they are subject to the laws in that place. And that means that governments can compel them to reveal information. So it is alleged that this is what actually happened in case of PDOM, where one of those centralized exchanges that he uses, because he had his wallet address up at the time of his functional operation. He had his wallet address up on his Twitter, and it was alleged that one of those centralized exchanges were actually compelled to reveal his identity. And this just shows the scale of geopolitical influence that governments have within when it comes to financial ties, when it comes to financial system, communication systems, and they can just about remove the veil. They can remove the veil on just about anybody that they are looking to identify. Now, what is the way forward with all of this that we've talked about? First of all, it's very important to know that with the way digital communication, the internet has advanced now, perfect anonymity is near impossible. It is elusive essentially, but because you have things like AI, you have quantum computing, you have adversary that have access to more resources than you can ever imagine. You have people actively working on ways to break just about every security mechanism that you have come to mind. And increasingly, your digital identity is now tied to your offline identity due to something called surveillance capitalism. Now, surveillance capitalism is basically the idea where companies are surveilling you in order to sell something to you. So think of all the ads you are getting on Facebook, Instagram, Google is as a result of surveillance capitalism. So even if you don't have taking Facebook for example, even if you don't have a Facebook account, it is very likely that Facebook has something of a profile on you that just speaks to your digital body language so that they are able to sell ads to you. So with all of this in mind, it does not matter whether you have some of these you are present on some of these on digital spaces. If you have friends that are, you are exposed. If you have family members that are, you are exposed. If somebody on your contact list decides to just decide to let Facebook access their contact and you don't have a Facebook account, it does not matter, you're already exposed from there. That just means that perfect anonymity is just about elusive. But there are some techniques that you can take to advance to enhance your privacy as an individual and as an organization. So when we're looking at digital communication, one of the things that we pointed out in this presentation is that privacy enhancing behavior actually makes you stand out and it brings attention to you. So that means if you are at risk and you're trying to choose a digital communication mechanism, you should choose one that has a large user base in your location. So if I pick a random app that I say common in the Middle East, but just about nobody uses it in Nigeria, I would definitely stand out when anybody is observing the traffic coming out from my location. So you should choose platforms that have large user bases, and so you are able to adequately blend in with the rest of the internet users. You should also prioritize open source applications with end-to-end encryption. Open source because it is community managed and people are able to pick up on what is wrong with this application very early on. And you should and open source also means that you're able to fully understand how this thing works, where your data is going, how your data is being processed. You should also be aware of metadata vulnerabilities, like we explained before. So timing analysis, correlation attacks, where the entity observing you can just take data about the data you are sending in order to identify who you are, what it is you're trying to do on the internet. Now, a common misconception is that Telegram is very secure. You see the law when people are trying to opt for anonymity and all these things, they opt for Telegram. But the truth is, by default, Telegram does not provide you with end-to-end encryption. And if you've been following the news cycle recently, you would see that Telegram has been involved in a lot of legal troubles where governments around the world are actually compelling them to reveal information about users that are on their platform. And they're able to do so because by default, there's no end-to-end encryption on Telegram. Then you should also consider using Tor network and Tails operating system for maximum privacy. So there's a certain degree of privacy that Tor network can actually provide you. Combining this with other tools as well just increases your chances of being private. Now, like I mentioned before, finances is one of the ways you can definitely get exposed because there's a saying, follow the money. You cannot escape spending money. Finances is a very integral part of our life. So using traditional banking system can definitely create significant privacy vulnerabilities. So we already mentioned that centralized exchanges do not work very well in terms of providing the anonymity that cryptocurrency was originally designed for. In that case, you can decide to use something called OTC trading. That is over the counter trading. So the way OTC trading works is I would say very straightforward. So essentially, what you have is you have something called a counterparty. Think of it as a middleman. Now, that counterparty can be an OTC desk, it can be run by an independent firm, it can be a peer-to-peer platform, it can even be through your personal network, right? So that counterparty in this particular financial transaction would function as an escrow. What they will do is they'll take your transaction, handle it on their end, then the person you are trying to buy cryptocurrency from, they are also handling that end. Negotiation takes place once you and the person you are buying from come to an agreement. The third party that is the escrow holding your money, they wait for the both of you to confirm that the money has been received, the transaction is complete, and they send the money as necessary. Now, what the advantage of this is that your trading is not available public, is not on the public order book. So nobody's able to trace that trading back to you. A lot of the OTC trading is generally off the books. So you are not able to follow the money back to you. There's also the importance of multi-wallet approach, then and leveraging privacy coins as well, such as Monero. Those are coins that actually give you more privacy than typical cryptocurrency coins do. Then you can also break your large trades into smaller amounts. So, for example, if somebody should move $500 over just one account, it's definitely more suspicious than breaking that into chunks and moving it over time. Then, most importantly, cash still remains one of the most effective ways to remain anonymous, to be very honest, because if you are doing you paying cash, you go, nobody's having you write your name down, collecting, you say your thumbprint, your face, and all these other forms of identity that can easily be traced back to you. Then, if you're traveling, it's very important to take note to do the most minimalist configuration you need for your devices. It's very important that um, you only use tools that you need when you're traveling. You then, in addition to all of that, you should do something of a risk analysis, right? So if you're traveling, do I need to go with this device? There are jurisdictions where you go that your device is liable to be searched at the airport. So within that jurisdiction, it is perfectly legal for their security to ask you to open your phone and they'll search through your phone. There's nothing you can do about that. So if you're traveling, look up where you're going. Is this somewhere where I can take a device that has sensitive information? If no, then you should definitely not be traveling with that specific device. Then full disk encryption, encrypt your entire disk. I think if you use an Apple device, by virtue of having your Face ID and PIN activated, you definitely have disk encryption. Then air gapping just refers to essentially disconnecting. Okay, so air gapping refers to disconnecting your device from networks generally, so that only networks that are allowed, like your device is physically isolated from unsecure network. And once you have air gapping enabled, it also means that your device cannot connect to any other network within the vicinity until that has been disabled. Then your physical security measures are very, very important and essential when you're traveling. You should take note of your environment. If your device is missing, you should definitely report it and just ensure that everything you do is documented. You know where your device is at all times. You're within your site. You're within your just within your reach at all times. You should also practice physical security vigilance. And once you return from travel, it's likely that you probably connected to a public network, a public Wi-Fi, say at the hotel, at a bar, and as such, you should definitely change all your passwords and update your vault, your password managers. Very, very important. Now, so far, I've walked you through the concept of anonymity and how your attempts to become anonymous on the internet can actually make you much more, excuse me, can actually make you much more identifiable. So, for you to be anonymous on the internet, you have to do something of a balancing act where you are trying to create a delicate balance between your privacy enhancing behaviors at the same time you are trying to not stand out. So, it's very key that you're able to maintain an equilibrium between these two things, right? Perfect anonymity doesn't exist because there would, especially when you have very resourced adversaries where you have people that have more resources, more access to data about you than you do. Your privacy measures must also balance security and practical usability. So you don't want privacy measures that are so strict that you are now unable to that it affects the availability of the resources you are protecting. At the end of the day, that renders it null and void because you cannot use your devices. What is the point, anyways? Now, the most effective security approach is a sandwich approach that combines multiple layers. So, from your operating system to your networks to your finances to the applications you choose to communicate with. And it's also very, very important for you to keep up with what is going on in the ecosystem, what are the trends, what are the new threats, how can you stay on top of these things. And that also reflects in like the patches you are receiving. So if you receive updates for your devices, to use Android, you use iOS, more often than not, they are usually security updates to these things that just make sure sure your devices are much more secure. And it's very important that you are paying attention to all of these things. So thank you, and we'll be taking questions now.
Competition for the vast and scientific. There's a lot to unpack, and I'm sure many of us are now thinking more critically about our online privacy and anonymity. I know I am. So we'll be moving into our Q&A session now, where Stella will attend to the questions you have. If you haven't already, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat. We'll go through as many as possible as we have. Also, if you think the question will be better presented verbally, you can use the raise your hand feature to go ahead. Yeah, question, you can actually have one for you. Any topic that you emphasize in your presentation and that stood out in your report is data analysis. Can you elaborate on how that works in practice? Verbally, you can raise your hand to draw attention. And I asked Gisela a question while we were waiting for a response from others. I was saying that a topic that stood out in your report and that you emphasized during your presentation was metadata analysis. I asked if you could elaborate on how that works in practice.
Okay, so as I mentioned previously, metadata is simply data about the data you have, about the data you're sending. So we're on this call now. We're having a conversation. It's likely that nobody can hear what we are talking about except they are actually on this meeting. I said the time for the meeting. So the meeting started by 1 p.m., say it ends by 2 p.m. There is also, since this is an audio call recording, we can see spikes in when somebody was speaking, when it was silent, frequency of speaking. It's also likely that we can see, okay, there are maybe 11 to 14 different nodes that or different accounts that are on this meeting at this very moment. And say maybe at 30 minutes mark, somebody dropped off, somebody did this and that. Now from there, we're able to put together two and two to be able to tell to an extent what happened. So for metadata analysis, when we go through the metadata we have, we can now say, okay, this meeting ran for an hour. In that hour, they were speaking for around 40 to 45 minutes. This was what happened. This particular account spoke the most, and from there we can have a rough idea of what happened in the meeting without actually knowing exactly what happens in the meeting. Now, this is just a high level overview. It can be more nitty gritty if you go into it. So you can start looking at things like network metadata, things like your IP address, the protocol that was used in the communication, and it just starts to get, the more information you can get, the more you can identify a pattern and paint a picture of what is happening without actually having the actual information of what happened in that specific moment.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much, Priscilla. I think I'm just beginning to realize just how much metadata can entail. Thank you for that answer. We have a number of questions in the chat. Do you want me to read through them, or would you like to go through them and answer?
Okay, I think I'll just go through them and answer. So Ihoma is asking, how can we verify if the communication tools are providing the security they claim to provide? Well, first, the key thing here is actually a lot of reading, right? So for Facebook Messenger, for example, if you look at a lot of controversies around Facebook Messenger, you would see different information as to how Facebook Messenger works and what it collects, right? Reddit is actually your favorite friend. If you look up whatever communication tool you are using on Reddit, you'll actually find so much information about people talking, okay, why does this work? Why does this not work? And the thing with open source and community tools is that since there's more transparency as to what is going on with this particular software, how it works, and as such, you're able to have a community sourced opinion as to what exactly is happening with the security tool that you are choosing to have. With WhatsApp, their end-to-end encryption is true, but at the same time, they are collecting other forms of data that can still put you at risk. Okay, so Yusuf is asking about settings or application. Okay, so I mentioned something about air gapping. Air gapping just means that you are disabling your device's ability to connect to the any form of internal external network. So that can look like a lot of different things. Say you can disable the network interface on your computer. You can completely remove your device, your phone's ability to connect to a Wi-Fi. And in addition to that, say you use Signal for work, for example, or you use a specific email for work that you know that has sensitive information on that specific device. One of the things you can do when you're traveling and you have to travel with that specific device is to remove that account completely. There's also this password manager. I don't remember which one exactly. I think it's either LastPass or Bitwording. What it does is that it clears all your password for you and puts it in a vault. So anybody that is looking through your password manager will only see the passwords that you've already put on the allow list. So all of those things are just essentially removing information that you know you would put you at risk if somebody should view this information, say by physically accessing your device. Okay, so I will share a link to, I think, the link to the website I mentioned that you can use to check if somebody's using a VPN or not is actually in the report, but I think I can share a link in the chat box as well.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your thought-provoking question. And of course, a huge thank you to Bisola for breaking down this concept so clearly. With that, we have come to the end of our presentation. And I want to say a big thank you to all of you for joining us. We hope that this conversation has given you a clear understanding on the topic of privacy, and we hope that you're leaving here with useful, practical strategies. Again, a special thank you to our speaker, Bisola Adediji. It was an amazing session. I personally enjoyed it. So thank you for sharing your expertise. Thank you for shedding light on such a critical topic. Your research and recommendations have given us valuable steps to take control of our digital privacy, and we thank you for that. As we wrap up, we encourage you to download our just released reports, which dives deeper into everything we discussed today. You can find the report on our website through the link we'll share in the chat. We also invite you to stay connected with us by following Resilience Technologies on social media for the latest updates, events, resources on cybersecurity and digital resilience. Our social media handles will also be shared in the chat, so please do well to follow. And be reminded that the recording of this webinar will be uploaded on our YouTube channel, so feel free to revisit it, or you can share it with anyone who might find it useful. Also, do not forget to sign up for our newsletter to receive valuable insights and upcoming webinar announcements straight to your inbox. So the next time we're having one of these, you'll definitely be the first to hear about it. Everything you need to sign up, to follow, all the links are being shared in the chat box right now. Once again, thank you all for your time. Thank you for your participation, for your engagement. If you have any follow-up questions or feedback, please feel free to reach out to us. We'll definitely love to hear from you. We appreciate your time and we look forward to seeing you at our future events. Take care, stay safe, and have a lovely day. Bye.